Blah. Okay, so we're recording. So thank you, Shivani, for reading this question. Now, Anika, can you identify the thesis statement in this student's question? In this student's answer? Oh, I'm sorry. You guys remember what the question was?
It was,
Yeah.
well, to what extent did economic pressures impact the cultures of the different colonies?
Right, right. How did the? I think it was describe how the economy impacted culture in the colonies, right? Okay. So Anika, can you identify the thesis statement that we see in here?
Usually it's supposed to be at the end, but economic pressures influence other cultures pretty severely, maybe.
Yeah, I think the student intends that to be a thesis, okay? It is not a thesis. It's not really a statement, okay?
Right.
You guys should write this down. The thesis statement always needs to follow the most basic thesis in the world is X is true because of Y. X is true because of Y. That's the most basic thesis in the world. If you have at least that, then you have an argument. X is true because of Y, right? You always have to have that because statement. You always have to have a statement where you are introducing evidence of some kind, okay? You'll say this. So you would say something along the lines of, the economics of the South changed the values of people to value business because of slavery, right? Or slavery made the people of the South more concerned about business than religion, right? X is true because of Y. Okay, does that make sense? In this case, they're kind of saying X is true, kind of, right? But they're not actually saying anything. They're not giving me any evidence. Do you know what an argument is without evidence? What do we call that?
Unfounded.
An opinion. It's an opinion and nobody cares about your opinion. Okay? I don't care about your opinion. Shivani doesn't care about your opinion. Anika doesn't care about your opinion. No one cares about your opinion. Your mother doesn't care about your opinion, right? You need to give me an argument with evidence, okay? So whenever I grade one of these, I always walk through 4 steps. First step, is the student answering my question? When you look here, did the student answer my question?
Kind of.
Kind of, right? The question should be telling me how economics impacts culture, right?
Oh, yeah.
So if you think about it like how economics would be anything having to do with business, impacts culture would be like everything in everyday life, like everyday life. Okay? Do we have that in here? Kind of, but not really, right? So first question, already the student didn't do great. Okay, second one, did the student give me an actual thesis? We've already established we don't see a thesis. Okay, third, does the evidence connect to the thesis?
Well, that's not possible.
Well, if you don't have a thesis, it's very difficult to connect your evidence, right?
Yeah.
But let's say they start off here talking about economics, and then they spend a whole bunch of time talking about like religion, right?
Yeah.
All the stuff about religion here, that's just them vomiting on the page, right? That has nothing to do with it, throw it out, right? Okay, the last thing I always look for is, did the student do the reading or do the work? In this case, did they do their table thing, right? Did the student do the reading? Is it clear to you guys that the student did the reading or did the work on this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that they made a pretty reasonable effort. They talk about cash crops in the South. They talk about slavery in the South. They talk about the culture of New England with religion, right? Like I'm reasonably certain that the student did the work here. Okay. All right, let's look at the next one. Anika, can you read this one for me?
In this
Hold on. Let me put it down in the next page.
Okay.
Okay.
In the South, they were expected to make the money making crops or cash crops. These economic pressures led them to buying slaves and treating them unfairly. Since the plantations in the southern part of the country were the places where most of the country's money was made, the economy was business, not a place where people wanted to be free from England. Their main function was to make money, and they did that well. In the South, we saw purchasing of slaves to a higher extent than any other of the colonies, and this was because they were big on plantations where much help was needed to make the crops and to make money. Slaves weren't easy to get this help, especially since all a person had to do was buy them and not ever have to pay them for their hard labor. Since the economy was business in the South, this caused the Southerners to be harsh and mean to their slaves because their mind was only think about business and money.
Okay, so Shivani, what are your thoughts on this one right off the bat?
Mm-hmm. I'm a little confused, but it's all right. I
Okay,
think
so Anika kept
they have a
having to
thesis.
yeah, Anika kept having to stop and restart and it wasn't smooth, right?
Yeah.
Obviously that wasn't because Anika doesn't know how to read, it's because the grammar is so jacked up, right? The grammar is super jacked up on this. Here's the good news. Grammar does not count for anything on AP. Right? You can have super jacked up grammar and super jacked up spelling and still get 100% on the AP exam. Okay? There's one catch. If your grammar is so jacked up that they can't tell what it is, then they can't count it. Okay? But this student's grammar is okay. This student's grammar, this is probably a student who doesn't speak English at home, right? And their grammar mistakes here tells me that they probably speak Spanish at home, right? That's okay. That's cool. No problem, right? All right. So Anika or Shivani, either of you, do you guys can you see a thesis statement?
Yes, but it doesn't. I don't think it talks about the daily life or anything.
First sentence?
What sentence, Shivani?
The first one.
You're calling the first one?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What do we think of that as a thesis statement?
I think it has X is true, but I don't think it is. It doesn't have the because of Y.
Yeah, I do not see a thesis here, right? This is almost a thesis. This is pretty close to a thesis. This one is pretty close, right? Since the southern part places where most countries made money, made the economy and business, people didn't want to be free from England, right? This is getting pretty close to a thesis. The part that falls apart for me here is people were not a place where they wanted to be free from England, because the South did want to be free from England, which is why they joined the revolution, right? So this is pretty close. This is pretty close. In this case, it's just not correct. It's just not right, right? Okay, what do we think about their evidence? Is there evidence connected to their argument?
Kind of. It's not.
They seem to be making an argument about slavery.
Yeah.
Right?
I can definitely tell what their argument is.
Yeah, their argument is about slavery, and they are giving me a bunch of stuff about slavery, right? And they're giving me about the business in the South. They're so I would say yes, it's connected. It is mostly connected, right? They are talking about one thing the whole time. They're not going off about Christianity or something halfway through, right? So do we also see evidence that the student did the reading or did the homework?
I would say so, because they talk about cash crops and business.
Yeah. I think pretty clearly the student did the homework, and the student just didn't fully understand how to make the argument, right? Okay, so this is why both of these ones get a 3 out of 5. They get most of the points. They still pass, but they're not great, right? An answer like this. Say it again.
Are they actual student responses?
Yeah. I don't know who they were. I just searched by score and put them in here. But yeah, these are actual student responses. Yeah. Okay, let's look at this last one down here. Okay. All right. Shivani, go ahead and read.
Okay. Economic pressures influenced different colonies and their cultures heavily. The one it impacted the most, though, was the southern colonies because they relied so heavily on agriculture and cash crops, slaves just became a way of life for them. This changed the whole culture into a money-hungry region that relied heavily on suppressing minorities, whereas the other colonies had a different view. Most people can look back to the middle colonies and see that their ability to coexist with different cultures led to much of their economic success. If we look at the New England colonies, we can see that their riotous love of God influenced their life greatly, but the economy made them worry about their well-being too. All in all, the colonies were all affected by economic pressures, but all of them in different ways.
So I think this is supposed to be righteous love, not
Yeah.
riotous love, right? You read it correctly. It is riotous, but I'm pretty sure they meant righteous as opposed to like,
Okay.
I love you so much that I'm going to burn your house down. You know what I mean? This is this is probably righteous.
Yeah.
But you read it correctly. They just misspelled.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So what do we think about this one? Where do either of you, can you identify the thesis?
Is it the first two sentences?
Right. So if you take the first two, then that's a full thesis. Okay. The Veenstra standard is that you have to do it in one sentence. If you can't explain it in one clear sentence, then you don't know what you're talking about. You don't know it well enough. You have to be able to explain it in one clear sentence. Okay. I actually still see it in one. This is actually a fairly good thesis right here. Right. If you just tear out the one impacted to the region impacted by economy, then it's pretty solid. And it's, you know, a pretty solid thesis. And you're saying that they became a way of life and owning slaves and stuff, right? How about the evidence? Is it connected?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's pretty clearly connected. And they even go as far as to give a counter argument by telling me about New England and the middle colonies, right? They're doing a comparison here, right? And do we see evidence that the student did their work? Yeah, I think pretty clearly. This student got full credit on their question, right? And they did a really good job. Okay, so when you guys take your test and you do your quiz, I want you to make sure you follow the thesis standard, right? X is true because of Y. Okay, when you write a bigger paper for me, when you write like a bigger research paper, which we'll be starting up in the next unit, when you start a bigger paper, when you start essays and stuff, then your argument will become X is true because of A, B, C, right? You need to give me more evidence. But if it's something short, it's tiny like this, I'm really only looking for the one clean piece of evidence. Cool?
Cool.
Okay.
Cool.
All right, let's get our notes stuff. Okay, yeah, let's get the notes stuff. And then at the end, I'll just stop recording it and explain one of the assignments to you real quick. Okay, so am I correct? You guys have not done anything with Spanish or French America?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, you're correct.
Okay, so this should be what, big number L for you guys? Is that what's right? What are we on?
There's a letter?
We have letters.
Yeah, we've been doing them, organizing them by letters. We should have been.
I don't think we have.
Yeah.
Okay.
I thought he was like giving us a loss or something. I was like, oh.
Okay.
I
All
just think the headers.
Okay. All right. So Spanish America. All right. So Spain controlled everything from California all the way down to Argentina. Okay. During this time period, the part that we really care about is the United States. So Spain controlled Florida, and then the American Southwest. So Texas all the way up to like Utah, all the way to California. Okay. All right, so let's deal with Texas first, or let's deal with Florida first, because that's where the rest of the British colonies are. Florida was basically a failed colony. Spain viewed it as a failed colony. They went there looking for gold. They went there looking for riches, and all they found was like swamps and gators and mud. Right? So Florida, to the Spanish, was a failed colony, much like Florida is a failed state to the United States today.
Was it Florida? That one guy went looking for the Fountain of Youth.
Yeah, Ponce de Leon was looking for the Fountain of Youth.
Yeah.
He never found it. And
No,
ironically, Florida is a giant retirement home today, so it's not the Fountain. It's the opposite, right? So Florida basically just kind of sat there as part of the Spanish Empire. It just never really had a big population. It never really made any money. It just kind of sat there, right? Eventually, Americans from the colonies are just going to move in and just kind of take it, and the Spanish aren't going to be able to do anything about that. They're just going to kind of whine. All right, let's talk about the part over here. All right, so Spain has the whole section of the whole section of the American Southwest. This would be like modern day Arizona, New Mexico. This is home to the Pueblo people. Pueblo people. All right, so the Pueblo people are Native Americans that live in these kinds of structures here. These are these Pueblo structures, okay? These are Native Americans that were not nomadic. They did not travel hunting buffalo or anything like that. They are not nomadic. These are city dwellers, and they create cities. In fact, Santa Fe, right here in New Mexico, today the capital of New Mexico, Santa Fe is the oldest city in the North America. In the United States, don't say North America. It's the oldest continuously inhabited city in North America, and it's a native city that's at least 1,000 years old, and then the Spanish moved in. Today it's Santa Fe. Today it's Santa Fe, New Mexico, and it's been constantly occupied this entire time. All right. The reason why we care, they used to teach U.S. history where we didn't even count the Spanish and French. We just counted the British side because we all speak English, and the United States is very clearly linked to England in a lot of its cultural stuff. But the more modern way to look at this is that Spain and France actually had a big influence that actually changed a lot of aspects of America, right? So here's the things that you need to know about Spain. The first thing is something called the encomienda system. The encomienda system. This is a vocab word you need. Encomienda system. Yeah, I'm in the class. I can come down and see you when I'm done if you want. No, on our accounts, there isn't a 40-minute limit. There isn't. I oftentimes, in fact, the limit doesn't even matter, right? So it won't kick us off or anything. We just have it. Correct. Yeah. Okay, so the encomienda system is a plantation system where the Spanish enslaved the natives. It's a plantation system where the Spanish enslaved the natives. Now, the Spanish try to say this isn't slavery. They say it's not slavery because we're paying them. Okay? Here's what you need. They're paying the natives in Christianity. That's the payment. Is you have to work for me. You have to work in my plantation growing my food, and I give you Christianity. Sounds like a sweet deal, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. Also, I torture you and murder you if you aren't Christian enough. If you aren't the right kind of Christian, right? This is an incredibly brutal system. The Spanish system is incredibly, incredibly brutal. The Spanish are famous for being the most brutal colonial overlords in all of Europe, okay? I want to be clear here. None of the Europeans are innocent, right? The British, the French, the Dutch, none of them are innocent, but the Spanish are the worst. They are ruling over their colonies with a brutal, brutal policy, right? They kill tons of people, just rivers of blood. Okay? The other part that you need from the Spanish is called the Sistema de Castas. Or if you are from India, you might call this the caste system.
Hey, both of us are.
I know. I know, that's why I said that. I didn't say that in the regular class, but then I saw the opportunity to say it here. Okay, so this is a caste system, and basically what this is a super complicated race caste system, and it's all based on races, where you'll have like Spanish-born white people at the top, and then the next level down is American-born white people, and then the next one down is American-born white people that have one non-white grandparent, and then the next one down is American-born white people that have one, black grandparent or something like that, right? And like, no joke, they come up with like 30 different standards based on how many members of your family were not white and how many of them were black, how many of them were Latino or native Indians, right? Native Mexicans. How many of them were natives, how many of them were white, how many of them were black. What matters here is they're creating a system of society based on race. And the Southern whites are going to copy it. Right? And this is really built into the way Americans think about the world a lot of times, right? What race is Barack Obama?
Half white, half black.
Right. Most Americans would call him, we don't call him the first half white president, we call him what? The first what? Black president,
First black,
right?
Yeah.
Right? And Barack Obama is half white, half black, right? Half white, his mother was white, his father was black, but nobody calls him that. Everyone calls him the first black president, right? And reporters would even ask Obama that, and they would say, hey, President Obama, why don't you ever acknowledge your white half? Are you just ashamed of your mother? Are you ashamed to be white? And Barack Obama said, his response was, if I'm walking the street at night with a hoodie on, the police officer won't see me as half white.
That's true. And he does look pretty
black, right?
Yeah.
He looks in a way that basically everyone in America would identify him as black, right? Okay, this is this concept that he's half white, half black, which turns him black.
Black.
Right? And by American law, you get this later on, not yet, but eventually you get something called the one drop rule, that if you have even one drop of black blood, you are black. Right? India would do something similar, right? India has a one drop rule that if you have one drop as an untouchable, you're an untouchable.
Yeah.
Right? India has very similar rules to some of this, right? That's why we call it a caste system. That's why we use the same word, right? Okay, that's it for the Spaniards. Let's move to the next number. Big number M. All right, big number M is French, the Frenchy French. Frenchy French. Okay, so the Frenchies occupy this whole big blue section in the middle, okay? Whole big blue section in the middle, okay? Here's the Brits over here, here's the Spanish over here, here's the French, okay? The French are very different because the French bring almost zero women. Almost zero women. It's almost 100% men. And the French really don't make cities, right? If you don't have women, you can't make cities, right? That doesn't work. If you don't have women, you can't make a city. You just have a bunch of dudes sitting around, right? That's not a city. In order for it to be a city, you have to have like farms and houses and families and schools, and you have to have all that kind of stuff. And you can't have that stuff without women. So the French were almost 100% interested in beavers, in hunting beavers, okay? You guys may not know this, but Europe is cold. It's cold. It's really, really cold, right? Especially at this time period, right? In this time period, this is what we call the Little Ice Age. Europe was below freezing from the beginning of September till the end of May, right? There was like snow on the ground for like 9 months of the year in Europe at
It's
this
like 110 degrees.
Yeah, well, yeah, but back then Europe is really, really cold, right? It's far up north, it's really cold. And so if your entire continent is covered in snow for 9 months of the year, you need to get your hands on some of that sweet, sweet beaver pelts, right? Because you kill those beavers and you make a coat out of beaver, right? Beaver is awesome because it's super, super soft and it's totally waterproof, right? So the snow will just fall right off you, water falls right off of you, right? The other good thing about beavers is they're super easy to kill, right? How do you kill a beaver?
I don't know.
Where do you go to find a beaver?
A lake.
You go to his dam, right? You find the lake, you go to the dam, and then you just wait. You just wait, right? The beaver breathes air. It has to come up, right? You just sit there and wait. It pops up for some air, and you whack it on the head. Done. Beaver hunted.
How whack-a-mole is a thing?
Yeah. Or you just shoot it, right? You see it swimming up, and then you just shoot it. Or you could just you don't even have to do that. You could just put a trap at the opening of their lair. And then when the beaver wakes up, they walk into your trap, bada bing, bada boom, you're done. Right?
Yeah.
Beavers are super, super easy to catch. They're not like buffalo, which are out there killing you all the time. Right? All right. So the French beaver trade becomes massive, massive business. We're talking like, it ends up being something like a third of the French economy. Right? It's huge, huge business. All right. Because the French don't have cities, they don't have women, they aren't interested in making colonies. What they do is they basically just move through this whole area and they make friends with the natives. The French just make friends. Yeah, they make friends with the natives. They ally with the natives up and down the whole area, basically. We have a couple of battles, a few, but not very many. Not very many. The French just aren't interested in that kind of thing. Governor Frontenac is one of the earliest governors of what is today Quebec, right? This is him dancing with his allies. The French basically go into the tribes, and the tribes say, we don't trust white people. And the French say, well, we're not like the British. And the tribes say, how? And he says, well, we're not going to take your land and make a city. And the Indians say, all right, that sounds cool. What are you here to do? He says, we're here to kill some beavers. And the Indians say, that's cool. Why don't you give us some of the beavers?
That's
That's
so
cool.
wholesome.
Say
This
what?
is how it should be done. That's so wholesome.
Except for
Well, and
the
the
part where they
Indians
kill millions of beavers.
and the
Facts.
Indians are like, why don't you give us some of those sweet beaver pelts and we won't murder you in your sleep? And the French are like, that's cool. Why don't you tell me where the beavers are and I won't murder you in your sleep?
Aw, friendship.
Friendship. It's actually, we're making it a little bit lighter. I mean, there is, battles and killing and stuff. But compared to the British, the French are super friendly. Compared to the Spanish, the French are super, super friendly. Right? The Spanish are the worst, the British are in the middle, and the French are the easiest, nicest. One of the things that makes the French interesting is they actually create an entirely new tribe of people called the Métis people. And this is a tribe of natives that is half white, half French, and half native. They actually speak their own language called Métis, which is half French and half like Algonquin. They like merge languages together. The Métis still exist today. It's the largest tribe in Canada. It's also the largest tribe up in like Michigan and Minnesota and that area. It becomes the largest tribe in the Great Lakes. And it's a mix, just like we see on the picture here, right? Real white family, native mother, white father, right? And they all are mixed. It creates a new culture. This gives you a really good example of how Europeans are not all interacting with natives the same way. Cool. Okay, let's go to big number N. N, let's deal with women in the colonies. Okay, sex ratio in the colonies. All right, so the South is only 25% female. Okay, and we're talking about white people in the South. We're not talking about slaves. So 25% female, 25% female, which means 75% men in the South. Okay, the Southern states are by far the most male, which is going to cause some issues. Okay, so first of all, okay, there's at least two big issues. Can you guys anticipate what the big issues are going to be? What do you think? Anytime you have not very many women, what are you going to do? What's going to happen?
Rape.
Yep. So issue number one, this is going to increase the amount of rape. And who are they raping?
The slaves.
Slaves. Yeah. So those 75% men want to have sex, and they end up having sex with their slaves, right? And rape is the correct word when we're talking about a slave master and a slave. The slave cannot consent to sex because the power relationship is not the same, okay? In order for it to be sex, by definition, it has to be both parties agree to it, both parties consent, both parties agree, and in order for them to agree, they have to be roughly equals. They have to be partners, right? If he is having sex with her, she and he both have to agree that the other one is a partner in order for them to enter into that act together, right? A slave can't agree because the slave can't say no, right? So let's be clear, this is rape, okay? This is rape, and it's and you'll see this a lot when we talk about Thomas Jefferson coming up there. Thomas Jefferson owned a slave named Sally Hemings, and he produced children with her. He produced children with her, and he had a long-term relationship with her. People will try to tell you that Thomas Jefferson loved Sally Hemings. Is it possible that he loved her?
Probably.
No, he can't. He can't. He owned her as property. He sold the children. He sold the children, and he eventually sold her, right? That is not love. That's not a relationship. That's rape. It just means that he had a long-term rape relationship with her, where he raped her for a long period of time. And then people would say, but he gave her gifts, and he gave her nice dresses, and he gave her gifts. Well, she accepted the gifts because she, A, didn't have a choice, and B, it was an act of trauma. She was being raped, and her rapist was giving her gifts so she didn't feel so bad. Right? So when we get talking about this, it's important that we understand it and use the correct terminology here. Okay? Sex is consensual. Sex is not rape. Okay? All right. Why are we talking about this so much? The reason why is because the slaves are now going to start producing half-white children regularly, which means the whites in the South have to adopt a racial caste system again, kind of like the Spanish, right? This means that if your child is half black and half white, he is
Black.
black, which is how Thomas Jefferson is able to sell his own children.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it is.
Imagine selling your own children.
Let
And
it
he-
be him, because it's just
It's the twisted version of racism,
sometimes
right?
that like literally blows my mind how like yes, the founding fathers founded this country, but they weren't like saints, and the way that some people worship them these days blows my mind. I'm like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
okay. I mean, yeah, sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good example of that history is complicated, right? People
Right.
are complicated, and you're never going to find anyone who's totally evil or totally good, right? Like people are all going to be in this kind of gray area. And Thomas Jefferson is definitely a gray area. Definitely. He's definitely a gray area. We'll get Thomas Jefferson in the next unit. He's
I
not,
feel like George Washington is also a gray area.
a lot of them are. Yeah. I think you'll find that all of the founding fathers are kind of in a gray area.
Right.
Okay. All right. So let's let's deal with witch trials. Okay. This is a statement about women's rights. Okay. I'm going to spoil this for you right now. There were no actual witches. Okay. So there were no
So we
witches.
killed all those women for nothing?
Yeah.
What?
Okay. So witch trials have two components to it. They usually have a racial component and a gender component, like a sexist component. Okay. The racial component is that oftentimes what would happen is people in the society who wanted to, people in the society who were racist and wanted to justify their actions would find a black slave and blame them for doing voodoo. Right? The one in the picture here is Tituba. She's the most famous example. And she's this slave who was in Salem, Massachusetts, who supposedly started enchanting all the women with demons and devils, that, you know, demons would come up from hell and enchant these women. Okay? What we see here over and over and over again. Salem, Massachusetts is the most famous version of this, but we had witch trials all over the country. And witch trials were super, super, super popular in Europe at the time. Really, really popular in Europe. Okay? The United States only ended up killing like maybe 100 witches, but Scotland ended up killing like 700 witches, something like that, right? A lot. Okay? What we see oftentimes is that the women who are accused of witchcraft are usually accused of having unconventional behavior. Some of these women would choose to read things other than the Bible. Sometimes these women didn't want to go to church. Sometimes these women didn't want to get married. Sometimes they didn't want to have children. Sometimes they thought it was okay to speak back to their husbands. Sometimes they thought it was okay for them to like go out on their own and maybe even wear pants. Yeah. Or cut their hair. Yeah. Definitely witchcraft, right? What they found is witchcraft trials are basically basically 100% of the time, basically, witch trials are men enforcing rules on women, men who are trying to control women. That's almost always what it is, that it's a tool to control women, right? The real purpose here is that they want to control the women and make the women do what the men want, right? But you can't just do that because women aren't stupid, right? And so women are not going to listen. So instead, what you have to do is you have to package it up like something else. You say, whoa, hold on. I'm not here to control women. I'm here to stop witches, right? And then we package it this way that everyone can kind of agree on the lie, and everyone just kind of winks and they just accept the lie. Okay? Witchcraft, to be clear, witchcraft is always about controlling women and never about actual witches. Okay? In Salem, Massachusetts, they hang 19 women. They hang 19 women for witchcraft. Yeah. Okay. This is the last thing we're going to address today. And this is a big, big idea. A really, really big idea. Really, really big idea. It needs some stars in your notes. This should be O in your notes. Okay, so the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is a philosophic movement, a philosophic movement from Europe that included the following ideas. And then put these 5 ideas, but space them out in your notes so we can put some like little bit of definition on them. The 5 ideas coming down here. We should have 4 other students logged in today, but we don't. I don't know.
I bet one day the whole class is going to be on here.
I know. Well, if they
That'd be
keep
fun.
quarantining people, I have 12 students on quarantine right now.
Really?
Yeah.
What's the threshold? Is it 10 cases for 2 weeks?
15.
15?
15 cases shuts the school down. Right now, the
Right.
school's at 1. We're only
Okay.
at 1 case. So,
I know.
we don't. Okay, so okay, let's walk down these ideas. Okay, so first idea, liberty. Liberty is the idea that individuals can control their own destiny. That individuals can control their own destiny. You are not doomed by who you are. Okay? Next, progress. Progress is the idea that we can make the future better. We can fix society. We can make the future better. Just because the past was bad does not mean the future has to be. This is a new concept. Old school Christianity believes that you cannot fix humanity. Old school Christianity says you cannot fix humans. Humans are doomed. The only way to fix humans is to die and accept Jesus. Okay? The Enlightenment rejects that. Say it again. The Enlightenment rejects that idea, and they say we can fix things. We can make it better. Okay? Next, toleration. This is accepting other religions. Accepting other religions. This is also going to extend to accepting other kinds of people. Now, when most Europeans say accept other religions, they're talking about Christianity. Nobody's like welcoming a Hindu into their next door neighbor at this point in time, right? Yeah, sorry guys. Yeah, that comes later, but at this point in time, they mean like stop murdering each other for being different Christians. That's what the Europeans had just spent the last 160 years murdering each other about Christianity, and so they were really tired of that. Okay, so this next one is constitutional government. This is a government that is limited in power, and that derives its power from the people. Limited in power that derives its power from the people. All right, the last one is secularism. Secularism is the embrace of science and non-religious ideas. Okay? These ideas are massive, massive ideas. Okay, I just picked out like some of the biggest names of the Enlightenment here. These guys are all writing big, giant monster books, and these books are being published all across Europe, and people all across Europe are reading these things, all across the United States are reading these things, and these ideas are like on fire, right? They're on fire. Americans are reading these ideas so much, and that they're deciding, you know, we see this progress, right, with John Winthrop, with our city upon the hill, right? The United States can be better. We can be better than Europe, right? That's that idea, right? Toleration is like all those colonies in the middle where they're saying, hey, you know what? Your neighbor can be a Swede and a Jew and a German, and it's okay, right? Constitutional government, that's like the House of Burgesses. That's the Mayflower Compact, right? Liberty is everything in America, right? Coming out here, right? Secularism would be all of those states that aren't Massachusetts and are saying, you know what, we can do non-religious stuff. This is baked into our DNA. We are an Enlightenment country. Okay. All right. Of all these thinkers, you should know these thinkers just to be like a functioning human on the planet Earth, right? But they're not on the test. They're not on the test, but in order to be a functioning human, you should know them. Okay. The one you do need to know, the one that will be on the test, is the reading that you also have to do, John Locke. Okay. So I gave you a link on the front of the canvas to his second treatise of government. What I would like is for, by the next time I meet with you guys, I would like you to have the second treatise of government read, chapter 2. Just chapter 2, not the whole thing. It's a full-size book. I don't expect you to read all 200 pages. Just chapter 2. Chapter 2 is like 5 or 6 pages. Okay? And inside chapter 2, he talks about a social contract. Social contract is the idea that, so this is the name of his book. Social contract is the idea that we all have behaviors that we agree to do in order to interact with each other. It's the basis of society. So you and I agree not to murder each other when we go to sleep, right? Because you agree not to murder me and I agree not to murder you, you and I can have an agreement where we can both sleep soundly, right? If you and I are constantly at war and we may murder each other, you're never going to get a good night's sleep, right? So once we have that basic agreement, we can start making other agreements. Now that we've agreed not to murder each other, let's also agree not to rape each other or hit each other or steal from each other or, you know, do whatever, right? So now we have all these agreements. Now we're really great here. I have a peach tree, you have a tomato bush. I can give you peaches, you give me tomatoes, right? Now we have an agreement here, right? And then Anika comes in and says, hey, I've got a cow, let's get some milk. So now we're all eating peaches and tomatoes and milk, when previously the three of us would have just been stuck eating the one thing, right? All of that's from our same agreement that we have. It's all from that basic social contract. And John Locke is one of the fathers of this theory, okay? And this theory is going to become the basis of our US Constitution. In fact, when Thomas Jefferson writes the Declaration of Independence, he literally copies John Locke. He like has memorized it and is copying it out into the Declaration. Okay, so did you guys get the link? You have it on the front page, right? Okay. All right, I'm going to stop recording it here because this is good, and then I want to talk to you about our assignment.